Hi, everyone. This is Glenda Dawson, an LD, and you are here at Glenda's.
That's the first lady of LA radio.
Yes, it
That's
is.
Sheena Metal.
Yep.
I thought you said Sheena Easton.
Oh, if only.
Oh, oh,
No, this is
no.
better for me.
Well, welcome everyone. This is Glenda's Dragon's Den, and we're on the Conscious Awakening Network on Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and other streaming platforms. And as she's already been introduced, Sheena Metal, how are you?
Hi. It's
Well,
so
she needs to
wonderful be
introduce
here.
her partner there.
Oh yes, and
Oh,
your
this
partner.
is Cullen the cat.
Yeah.
Hi,
Cullen is
Colin.
here. He would love to say hi, but he only looks at his mommy right now.
I understand.
He is my magic baby. I've had him since he was 3 days old. I
Mm.
always say the first 3 days were the hardest, and then everything since then has been great, huh? I know.
Well, that's how it was on our honeymoon.
He is truly my soulmate, so he literally clings to my body pretty much 24/7.
Oh.
He's such a good boy. It's so wonderful to be here with you. I love the intro. I feel like I'm on an episode of Game of Thrones.
Yes, I know.
I'm very excited.
Well, we'll try to make sure nobody dies here, okay?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and winter's coming, but not in this hemisphere.
Yeah. Okay. I like that story. That's fantastic. It's wonderful to be here with you, and I'm honored. And I'm Sheena Metal, and I'm a psychic medium and a healer and an empath. And my mother was also a psychic medium. I live now in my childhood home, which has her energy all around it. The camera is on her desk right now, which is kind of magic. And Glenda, dragons were her thing. So she would be so happy that I was here. She would love the name of this podcast.
Well, my title is Dragon Wrangler, so
Oh, I like that. Is that what
Yeah.
you wrangle the dragons?
somebody's got to do it.
All right, I'm gonna put this baby in his bed. You go get in your bed, sweetheart.
We had a show in our last iteration on St. Patrick's Day, and the dragon had too much green beer.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
I
anything
was
on
wearing
St.
it.
Patrick's Day is good. So that's good. That's good. So thank you for having me. And I know you probably have questions, and I have lots of answers probably.
Well, okay. You said your mom was a psychic medium.
Yes. Yeah.
So you were able to be open about your gifts and all that since day one, basically.
Very much. My mom was kind of in the closet about it until I was in college. We just knew it was like, ha ha ha, that funny thing that mom can do, but we never really talked about what it was, although she knew.
Right.
I think being born in the South during the Depression, it wasn't something you came out and went, guess what? I'm a psychic.
No.
But yes, I was raised to ask. One of the first things I remember my mom saying to me was, no questions are off limits. Anything you think about, you're allowed to ask me, no matter what it is, no matter what genre it is. If you have a question, just ask. So I grew up being able to ask these questions. And I remember when I was in my early 20s, I had a boyfriend who had been on a lot of psychedelic journeys. And I remember him asking me once, how come you've come to all the same spiritual conclusions that I came to, but you've never done peyote or mushrooms or LSD or psilocybin or whatever? And I said, it's because I grew up in a house where I could just ask.
Right.
So I didn't feel like it was off limits. There was no repression. And I think it was because my mother had felt repressed her entire life. So she wanted to make sure I didn't feel that same sort of repression. My grandmother was, for her generation, a very well-known, kind of almost like a celebrity psychologist. So for my mom to have gone to her and said, like, hey, I think I'm a psychic, like that would have been, a no-no, and then would have wound up in one of my grandmother's books. When your child has the delusion that they're a psychic would have been a chapter of one of the books. So mom knew to avoid that. So I think just growing up in that open, free environment, and you know what, both of you, not just for me, but also for all my friends growing up, people that couldn't ask their parents things came over here and asked my mom, and everyone called my mom mom. To this day, people from high school are like, what was your mom's name? Because everybody just called her mom. And then as I became more of a voice, as I started in radio 28 years ago, and I started telling stories about her, and because we were so close, and people started sort of picking up her teachings secondhand from me. And then after she passed, I got the download from Spirit to found a nonprofit peace, love, kindness, unity movement called raisingthevibration.org,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of carry on more of her teachings. So it's amazing sometimes how one person can touch one person with a message, and then that message can literally be carried around the world.
Right.
And my mom was very quiet. She was very shy. You wouldn't have caught her doing something like this. I think I roped her onto my radio shows like 2 or 3 times. She was very nervous to do them and wouldn't have done them until she was much older because she was so shy. So these messages never would have gotten out if it hadn't been for me.
Mhm.
And I sort of feel like my purpose on the earth was to be raised on her teachings and then to be able to pass them to people.
It's very, very good that you were able to be raised open with her.
Yes.
With me, it was basically the same thing, but I could only go and ask her, my mom. My father was very Christian, and that was a big no-no. But I was able to ask my mom everything. So my whole life, I was able to be open to her.
Sure.
And my friends knew, and in college, people were asking me to read for them and the whole thing. So they all knew, but I couldn't exactly come out of the so-called closet and say, "Hey, I'm here," because back then it was kind of like still not accepted that much.
Absolutely. And I didn't for years. So I'm sorry.
And with my mom, back in the 50s, she enjoyed ECT.
Okay.
For her presentations and all.
Yeah.
And I actually wound up all the way going vice chair of resource development for May Haney's because I brought that whole, well, maybe they're just psychic into the mental health New York State advocacy picture. So yeah, it's problematic sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. And my mother too worked as a therapist and a special ed teacher. And I think she used a lot of her psychic teachings in there. I feel that way too. I counsel clients all the time that they think they're crazy or they've been diagnosed with this or diagnosed with that. And I would never say that a psychologist or a therapist had diagnosed somebody wrong. I am not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. My mother was, my grandmother was, I am not. But I do see sometimes how empathy, intuition, psychic gifts, mediumship gifts can be wrongly diagnosed as something wrong with you. In the same way that I don't believe that we should consider the autism spectrum something that is like a disability. I think it's more just people that they just work on a different energetic plane. And I've taught a lot of acting and radio to autistic kids and adults, young adults. And I got to tell you, they're just on a little bit different of an energy plane. But I think, and don't you both agree, that when you're a psychic, you're communicating with all different kinds of beings on different energetic plane, right? A dolphin, the cat, a person, an angel, an off-worlder. So you learn just to pick up the different frequencies and be able to communicate, like speaking different languages.
Exactly.
Well, I actually helped develop a protocol in New York where people working with children on the spectrum would go into meditation before they would see their clients, so they wouldn't bring their frenetic energy into the encounter, which the client is very sensitive to.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, then again, you have conversion therapy. So when you have people that are that steeped in their delusions, and I'm not talking about the clients.
Right.
You know, it's the gamut, and hopefully people find someone like you who can help them see a different alternative than drugs or therapy if that's appropriate.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of my psychic friends laugh because I take all the clients nobody wants. Like psychics will call me and say, I can't handle this client anymore. And I'm like, give them to me. Because you know what? My mom was like that. And I'll tell a story that I just told the other night to a client. When I was 7, my mom went back and got her second master's in special ed. Her first was in education, and she was an elementary school teacher. And then she decided she wanted to branch into working with mostly with emotionally disturbed kids. So they gave her right out of school this classroom of kids who all had super genius IQs and were violent. And the parents were at the point of institutionalizing them. Now, this was in the early 70s, right? The mid 70s. So she had told me all these stories of these kids that brought knives to school. They threw chairs at her. They called her all kinds of names. And when she would go off to work with these kids as a little kid, I was scared. So one day she told me that one of the kids in her class, the one who had thrown a chair at her, his parents franchised a Dairy Queen. And we were going to go to Dairy Queen and meet this kid and his parents. So we pull up to the Dairy Queen, and I just heard ice cream, and then all bets were off. We pulled up to the Dairy Queen, and this little tiny guy, he looked kind of like the kid from A Christmas Story. He comes running out of this Dairy Queen, and he comes running, screaming at my mom, calling her name. And I think this kid is going to kill my mom. He leaps up into her arms. I mean, kind of like the cat just was with me, right? He's got his arms around her neck. He's got his legs wrapped around her waist. And he's like, just hi, and telling her all about his day. The parents come out right afterwards. Both of them are in tears. They can't believe for the first time in their life, they actually have a child they can live with. And that was when I sort of realized the magic of my mother, and that she had this ability to find the good nugget inside of somebody and nurture it and heal. And I mean, then she was just my hero for life. I mean, if she hadn't been already, because what an amazing gift to be able to do that. And how many of those kids in that class would have been written off had they not had that class with her. How different would their lives have been? So when somebody calls me and says, look, I have this client and they're this and they're that, and they yell at me and they call me names, I don't want them anymore, I say, send them to me. And because somebody has to help them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I seem to have a high tolerance for it. And sometimes they do. I don't know if your clients ever do this, but sometimes they call me names. I mean, they'll yell at me. They get mad at me. They say horrible things to me. And oftentimes don't ever apologize. But you're not supposed to take it personally, right?
No,
Is
exactly.
it one of the 4 agreements, right? What somebody says about me is none of my business.
Right.
My job is to heal. My job's not to get like butt hurt because somebody got mad at me because their boyfriend didn't come back.
And sometimes they just need to let it all out, right?
Yeah, right.
And so they trust you enough, and they're open enough with you to do that.
Yes.
They know you're not really going to yell back. You're not going to scold them. You're not going to do any of that stuff.
Of course.
I have my clients that do that.
My immersion in psychology as a student was this little box called sanity, and it could be the Maslowian box or the Rogerian box or the Pearlsian box, but it was a box, and it was their box. And I'm like, I don't fit in those boxes, so what the heck am I going to do? And I rejected all of that. Someone else's idea of what sanity is. I wound up training as a coach with the IPEC system, which basically is, as long as you're not going to hurt yourself or anyone else, make yourself happy,
Sure.
And so to me, that just made a lot more sense. And yeah, I would take the clients nobody wanted, and no one has filed a complaint yet.
Yeah, for me either, luckily.
Yeah. Exactly.
But somebody has to help these people, right? I mean, everybody wants the psychic client who's like eager to find out about their path and does everything that you ask them to, and grows and gets better. And sure, everybody loves that one.
Right.
Tells all their friends who do the same thing, and then they hire you to go do a cocktail party where everybody's on their path. Great. Except who helps the people that are literally contemplating suicide and no one is helping them.
Right.
And I think that's whether you're a spiritual counselor like what we do, Glenda, or you're a psychologist, or you're a therapist, or you're a minister, which I also am. You got to help the people that need the help, not just the pretty ones.
Exactly.
Not just the easy ones. And for me, I think that's my service. That's part of my service to spirit. And
that brings to me a lot of joy and satisfaction to know that I'm able to be here for them.
Yes.
It it helps. Even if we're not attaching to the outcome, it still makes you feel good that they were able to find you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I consider it kind of all my ministry.
Hmm.
I think it all sort of falls underneath that. And it's just the work you would do, right? Sometimes I'm at a party and somebody corners me and they don't even know I'm a psychic. They just corner me and they want to have this big discussion and have me help them with an existential crisis.
Right.
And I sit right there and do it. And I remember I did it once at a party. This lady sat next to me I had never met at a friend's party. She did not know me from Adam. And she suddenly wanted to tell me the story about how she was a second generation atheist and her daughter in her early 20s had found evangelical Christianity. And she was furious because she thought it was a bunch of hooey. And
Right.
she wanted her daughter to have a sense and be an atheist like the family was. And she talked to me about a half hour. She got up to go get some food. And my friend who had the party sits next to me. He's like, "Oh, doing your ministerial duties at the party again, I see." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's just what happens." But I love it. I love every minute of it. And, I read for clients at 3:00 in the morning. I read for clients at, I'll take 3:00 in the morning. Somebody calls, I'll take one more.
Right.
And because somebody needs help and I can always sleep later and I'm there to help them. So, I love it. I guess probably other people would find it not to be, not great that I'm pretty much consider myself on call all the time.
Right.
But you have to be, right? And it's not for everybody. Some people
No.
have my office hours are 12 to 2 every day. Okay, great. That's for you. Me, last night, it's like 2:00 in the morning. I've got a client in the car. I'm sitting at the beach looking at the ocean. My client's in Hawaii, also looking at the ocean. I thought this is beautiful. This is what it's all about. It's
Right.
about connecting with people and helping them. Way more important than anything I could be doing if I wasn't in service with a client.
Yes.
Well, I love there was a show where the threat was you will be assimilated. It's like we are assimilated. It's just some fools are in so much denial that they have a crisis.
Right. Right.
We're all connected to the universal consciousness.
Yes.
And I've been woken up at 3 a.m. by someone who was about to kill themselves that I hadn't spoken to in 6 months.
Right.
And called them up and like, what are you doing? And why are you calling me? I said, because I heard you. Can we talk? Right. I was about to rip the phone off the wall and kill myself. Well, I heard you. Why do you think that is?
Exactly.
And there you go. And they made a better choice.
Yeah, it's 100% about helping and healing. And I know not every spiritual practitioner has that. It's not about that for them, and that's okay. Yeah. But for me, it's all about rolling up my sleeves and really getting in the trenches and help who needs help.
Right. I mean, I've been called by spirit at any time in the middle of the night and just just get told, go to Dunkin' Donuts. Oh, come on. It's really in the middle of the night. I really need my beauty sleep. Go. Okay. And you just go there and you're like with your coffee like half dead. And you sit at the only table that there, and somebody just shows up and sure enough, they just needed somebody to talk to.
Yep.
And just by doing that, by you being available, no matter how it is or how that appears to be, it changes their life.
Yes. And so many kids are parented that they're here to serve their parents. They're here to serve their church. They're here to serve their community. And then they just implode because there's no time for them. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that just show up at Dunkin' Donuts at 3 a.m. and just need someone to care about them.
Right.
Yes.
Take their turn.
Yes. I learned that, years and years before I was in the psychic closet. I worked for the better part of 10 years on what was then the Howard Stern affiliate radio station in Los Angeles. So they basically took the Howard Stern format and they made talk shows all day long. It was called FM Talk, formatted based on that. And it was shock jocking, right? But I worked overnights and we were the only girl show on a station full of guys. And we had all these the nurses, the security guards, the longshoremen, the truck drivers, everybody who worked that overnight shift and was lonely.
Right.
And we were the voice for them. And they would call and tell us all their problems. And long before I would have admitted to you that I was psychic, my job was to kind of suss out who they were in one sentence, say something funny to summarize their thing, hang up and go to the next one. Now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, that was like doing cold reading after cold reading. But at the time I was in denial. So, but yeah, those were the people that needed the help. Those were the people that were lonely. I mean, and I always worked holidays. I was very cool. I don't really have a big family. So it was just mostly my mom and me and friends. And she would always say, you know what? Christmas can be celebrated anytime. So I always took a shift on Christmas Eve and I always took a shift on Christmas Day because nobody else wanted to work those days. And people needed, they needed live radio. They needed to know somebody was out there on that day and they weren't alone, you know,
Right.
and that was really important. So, and I was glad I did that. And I still do that. I'll
Yeah.
still pick up shows on holidays. And you know what? Because I can always celebrate with friends afterwards. The most important thing is that the service is done, right? I think your service on the earth is the most important thing about your life.
Yes. That is so true. So true. So how did you get to radio?
I, in my 20s, in
Mhm.
the early 90s, realized that girls that look like me were not getting cast in television and films. Now they are, but this was 30 years ago. So I put together a one-woman show of characters that I did that I was hoping to take to the stage. And what happened was I kept getting cast on public access shows. And I was a regular on a show where I sat on a toilet and gave advice with two guys from Jersey. And they sat on nicer toilets and I sat on the guest toilet. And then the director of the public access said, you should put your own show together. So I did. I put a show together that was mostly, you know, rock and roll with actors and musicians and all kinds of stuff. And a guy that I knew who had a talk show on that same station called me one night and said, I have a radio show. It's Sunday morning at 2 a.m. I have a new girlfriend. She hates that we can't go out of town because I'm always at the station on Saturday night. She hates that I come home Saturday night at 3 o'clock in the morning. Would you take my show for a week? They'll probably fire you, but at least you can say you did it and put it on your resume. And I was like, yay. At that time, the show that I was doing had become very successful and it was syndicated all over the country and I had gotten picked up by a bigger platform and was about to go into production and the Northridge earthquake hit and destroyed their station.
Mm.
And they said to me, look, it's a $20 million rebuild. We may never do this station now. And I was devastated. And then right, like when God closes a door, they open a window, right? Just like
Right.
the Christians say. The next day I got this call and I went down there and I did the show. And it was kind of like that moment when the hand of God kind of touches you and you think, oh my God, this is what I do. And I think in my life, that's only happened 3 times. The first time was the first time I stepped on a stage as an actor. The second time was that night. And the third time was the first time I did a psychic reading where I realized, oh God, this is what I do.
Mm.
And they called me the next day and I'm like, oh, I loved it. And they're going to fire me. And they're like, okay, we want you to come back on a regular basis and you need 2 hours.
Ooh.
So that started my radio career and I haven't stopped working. I've worked nonstop in LA since August of 1994.
Wow, congratulations. And talk
And I
about
love it.
the touch of God, right?
Exactly. Talk about spirit. Yeah. Everything I had done up to that point that I was good at prepared me to be a radio host.
Right.
The fact I'm kind of a sponge and I want to learn everything, that I'm endlessly fascinated with people, that I'm good at speaking. I'm good at cold reading. You can put up something in front of me and I can just read it. I mean, everything set me up to be that. And I love it so much. And I currently do 2 radio shows for iHeartRadio. And I now do, and you've been on one of them, Glenda, and I want you to come back and do the other one.
No, I haven't.
Well, you got to come too, baby.
Oh,
do it. When
well,
are
I
you going to
haven't
come?
been invited.
Oh, well, you're always invited. It's an
Oh.
open invite. Yes,
Oh.
let's do it. All 3 of us next
You
time.
heard her. Wait, this is recorded, right?
Absolutely. No, that's a for sure invitation.
So, what is your big news?
Oh,
Oh!
Are you my stalker? So,
Yeah. He is.
She's your stalker. She
a
just
wonderful
sent it to me.
new streaming network called the Intuitive Network
Mm.
that mostly now has all kinds of independent films and independent television. has asked me to do a reality-based weekly spiritual program for them starting next month. So I don't have all the details to release now, but I can tell you it'll be weekly. I wanted to start weekly. They wanted to do daily, and I'm like, let me overpromise instead of underpromise. And it's going to be talking about spirituality and also me like reading for average people. I've never done a show like that before, and I've always wanted to. And I can tell you the name of it is Messages from Spirit.
Nice.
Because I'm not going to be like in a grocery store accosting somebody,
Right.
but people will be calling into the show or coming in via video into the show.
Right.
And it's available on all the streaming platforms and everything. And I love their energy. I love the quality of films and television that they're loading. They're a brand new network that's only been up since September. They have 700,000 unique members already.
Wow.
It's growing so fast, and some really nice big names and things in the film and the television shows. And they have like horror films, they've got documentaries, they've got music, but they don't have spiritual yet. They have an Los Angeles anchor is going to be doing a health and wellness show for them starting next month. So it's kind of the most wonderful thing that's happened, and I'm so excited about it. And
as well you should be.
And as well I should be. Yeah, mostly excited because most of my shows, like I do a web TV video podcast on Fridays for KGRA digital, and I love it. But mostly when people hire me to do things, they're like, can you interview celebrities? And when I started the show with KGRA a year and a half ago, I said, yeah, I will interview celebrities because, like my friends that are famous people, but I also want to make it spiritual. So that show is sort of where my entertainment life meets my spiritual life. It's called the Sheena Metal Experience, and it's creativity, spirituality, humanity, passion, and service. But I've always wanted to do one where people could see how a psychic medium can change a person's life in the course of a reading. I think it's so important that people see people getting help, because when you see people getting help, then you start to believe that help is possible. And when you believe that help is possible, then you regain your hope. And when you regain your hope, then you're on your way to healing.
Exactly.
So just for people watching, seeing other people get healed will help them to get healed. And I think we need that so much right now, because we've kind of fallen into this complacency lull. It kind of a strange thing where we're not really believing in anything right now. And if you talk to the average person, they're going to tell you more what's wrong than what's right, what they don't like more than what they do. Everybody wants to talk about, politics, sociology, cultural stuff, religion. It's all what upsets them. It's not like what they're just super excited about. And I think we just need to flip that switch a little bit from a glass half empty to a glass half full perspective as a species right now.
Yes.
Well, this is, in my sense, what's driving the teen suicide epidemic, because they look at it and say, what's left for me?
Exactly. Right. Yep. What's the point?
Yeah. Things aren't getting better.
Yeah.
And this planet may not be here in my lifetime. So, it's YOLO.
Right. The planet is a thing. Right. And it's all from a very negative perspective. Like I hear people say all the time, why are we remaking films and television shows? Can't we think of any new ideas? Well, the truth is, if you look at the history of film and you look at the history of television, we've always remade things. I mean, I think A Star is Born has been made 5 times. In every single generation, there's been a version of A Star is Born. So it's natural to remake things and make them current. It's not a bad thing, but I think we're so stuck on this idea of, see, everything's so bad, we can't even come up with new ideas.
Well, it's beyond that. It's the idea of bringing different people into the title roles that I think is upsetting a lot of people. And, you don't have to watch it, but there's a whole bunch of people that want to see that girl play the mermaid.
I agree. And I grew up a theater baby. My mom loved musicals. I think I've seen 25 people play the Music Man. You know what I mean? I mean, obscure, weird, obscure, bizarre things I have seen in theater.
Right.
But that's
26.
normal theater. What?
26.
Right, exactly.
Now I've done it.
Yeah.
That's
So
normal.
now you've seen
theater.
26.
Yeah, I know, right? But that's normal in theater, right? You want
Right.
to see who's doing the role now.
Exactly.
And their
So
interpretation.
right. And so it's normal to be doing it with shows as well, and to do prequels and spin-offs. And I think it's fun. And I think it's great that there's so much content out there right now. So many things to look at. And especially in our world, right? Because when we were kids, there weren't psychic shows.
No.
There weren't paranormal shows. Maybe you'd get one movie at Halloween time.
Yes. One
And
movie. and it kept repeating every year.
exactly. For a while we had In Search Of, and that was like
Right.
amazing that happened.
Right.
But there weren't a lot of choices. And now folks that have gifts, folks that, like I am, paranormal survivors of very active haunted houses. There's all kinds of information to find your community and find your tribe. And I think that's so wonderful.
Exactly. And like you, have also experienced paranormal. I own a house from 1900.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
Yes. Although we have a deal. They stay in the walk-in attic, and then the rest is for the living.
Okay.
I still say if you can get them to pay rent, they can come down.
I want to know, do you go in the walk-in attic and hang out with them, or is the attic a place only for them?
No, I have gone up there. Nobody else likes set upstairs.
Well,
do you have stuff up there?
I have no problem with going upstairs.
No, nobody. Even my children, they're like, they go up to a certain step and they're like, yeah, no. My daughter was the only one that was really brave. She went upstairs a few times with me, and then she saw a real looking casket. The guy going like this, sitting up, looking at her, and then just went back down and did this. And she's like, "Yeah, no, that's it. I'm done."
Right, some real haunted mansion stuff for her.
Yeah,
yeah. That's my house is on an Indian burial ground.
Okay.
So I am very careful to keep it very warded, because I don't want spirit activity in my home. Right. Having lived in a very negative home outside of Baltimore as a kid, I don't want that again. So I just I make sure that I have a lot of salt lamps in the house, and I have a lot of selenite wands and selenite towers and a lot of brooms. This house is full of brooms. People must think this is the dustiest house at the beach, because there's 2 brooms in every room. And it's managed to keep the activity out.
Yeah.
Because the salt lamps are always on. It's never dark in the house. And it's always, and I do everything I can for positivity, and Cullen does as well. I don't get angry in the house. Cullen and I do not fight. I don't raise my voice to him. And which is challenging when you have a kitten. Yes. And anything that's like a scary paranormal, because I love that kind of stuff, haunted horror movie, we only watch during the day. At night we only watch happy stuff. We watch a lot of Food Network at night, because he likes all the cakes and the pies moving around on the screen. Sometimes he gets on top of the TV and bats the cakes and the pies. He loves that. But we don't, I keep the house very neutral. Right. No drama. And he's so used to not drama that I had a friend come over to have dinner, and she came in to meet him, and she was crying the whole time. She sat down on my stoop and started crying. I mean, not about us, but about some other things in her life. And he hissed at her, because I think he thinks like negative is bad. Right. Because he doesn't really see that. So, so that's helped to keep this. I mean, look, I feel it outside the walls. I feel that it wants to come in. I feel them all out there. And Cullen looks so much out the screen door at night that I'm like this. I'm a little scared to get a Ring camera put out back. I'm like, I was just telling my friend the other night, I don't know if I want to know what we find on that thing. And he's like, oh, I do. Give it my number so it'll let me know. And I'm like, I don't know. Don't tell me. Because it is a burial ground, and it is below sea level. And my backyard is just a pool pretty much. So it's a lot of water and it's a lot of humidity and it's a lot of Native American
Mhm.
and then there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm doing readings all the time and
Right.
doing things all the time. But I don't do spirit board in my house.
Right.
So just say no to Ouija in your own home is my motto.
That's
We
we-
extend that in
we-
general.
Yes.
I don't do pendulum in my house. I don't do rods in my house.
Mhm.
I don't do spirit box in my house. All that is great for your haunted house. I don't want it in my house because I don't want my house to be any more haunted than it already is. So, do you feel that way too?
Yes, definitely Ouija boards. I've done pendulums in my house, but only to find the exact names of those that are my tenants, as I call them,
Sure.
because I wanted to make sure I could address them directly. Because when you ask, okay, what's your name? There's like, and there's more than one. They're all saying their name at the same time, and you're
I
like,
know.
okay, hold on, one at a time. Let's take
Right. Exactly.
And then it's like, which
one.
lifetime?
Yeah,
Yeah.
tenant number one.
Yes.
and I have underground springs under my
Oh,
property.
there you go.
So,
Right.
it just carries. And the original owner who actually had the house built, who built the house, was an attorney, and he's upstairs also
Mm,
hanging out with the house. I'm like, where's your wife? Like,
yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, and they're very peaceful. There
Yeah,
was
that's
only
nice.
one that was kind of disturbing my youngest son when he was a teenager. He kept saying, "Oh, you could do that. You're not going to get in trouble. Oh, you could do that. You could."
Okay.
Yeah, and then he came to me and he said, "Mom, this is what's happening." Oh, really? Okay, that one goes out because that's
Yeah.
not part of the bargain. The bargain is, you guys could hang out up there if you.
We all get along.
We all get, yeah, and
Right.
also they watch the house because I already have had neighbors come in before we even got together. I wasn't feeling good. They would come in, and the neighbors said to me that the door would close on them. They had to ask for permission to come in. And
Wow.
the whole thing. And I'm like, well, they're keeping an eye on
It's
me.
their house.
Right. Sure.
They're
Yeah.
keeping an eye on me. So, and but yeah, no, we're good. I don't do anything else in my house. I try not to even do readings in my house, actually.
Yeah, I do readings in
Right.
my house, but I do a lot of readings in my car. And I just got a new car. I leased a new car. And, every time I lease a new car, I wrestle with, should I really be spending this much money on a car? And then I remember, one, it's the only nice thing I really do just for myself. And then the other night I realized, you know what? This car is your office because this is where you do most of your readings. And this is probably a controversial, maybe taboo thing, but I love to read for people while I drive. I find driving at night and down here at the beach, there's nobody on the road at night.
Oh,
I find it to be very cathartic to drive up and down Pacific Coast Highway while I read for people. It's really easy to open the channel. And I always say, look, it's when there are no distractions, right? You have me alone
Yep.
in a bubble.
Mhm.
There's no people. There's no cat.
Whoa, what happened there?
That was weird, right?
Yeah.
That was some spirit activity
Yeah,
right there.
that
I turned blue. I was all blue, and you guys were gone. Anyway,
I turned blue, but it's not on camera.
I say, in the car it's an insulated place where there's no people, there's no distractions, there's no noise, there's no cat.
Exactly.
There's literally just me and calm. And I'm finding all these really awesome little neighborhoods. Even though I grew up down here, I moved to LA in my early 20s, and I still have my place up down there. Then I inherited this place when my mom passed, and it sort of sat alone for 6 years because I couldn't bear to be here without her.
Right.
And then suddenly it became okay, and I was going to fix it up and rent it, and I fell in love with it. So now I'm staying. So last night I was like, there's this one place in Newport Harbor. I've never taken a left turn. Like, what would happen if I took a left turn? And I found this whole peninsula where you could see in between the houses, the entire harbor, where the harbor goes out into the ocean. I'm like, this is beautiful. Then I went down by the pier and I watched the waves come, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And so that's what I do. And my regular clients all know it, and they love it, and they think it's fun. And so, yeah, that's my big secret. Sometimes when I'm doing your reading, I'm actually in the car.
Do you ever have a challenge grounding in the car?
No, I don't. I don't at all. I don't know why, but I always feel tremendously grounded in the car.
Good.
Maybe because I've lived in this town for
Yeah.
almost 50 years.
Right.
I'm just grounded in this area. The
Mhm.
only time I ever had a hard time grounding was the first time I went to Sedona.
I got to ask you a showbiz question.
Sure.
And probably someone's already taken it, but I always felt that a great showbiz name, I mean, because I worked with Rain or Shine. I did live theater with Rain or Shine. Lisa New Car.
Oh, I love that. That's like a drag queen name. I think that's your drag queen name. Next time I do the show, I want to see you in full drag, and I want you to
I wasn't going to bring that up, but now that you mention it,
that is your drag name. You're all ready to go now. I want to see like a very Moulin Rouge kind of lingerie on you, like Moulin Rouge.
There you go.
That's what I'm seeing. Tassels and lace and fishnets.
There you go.
Yep.
I might have a new hobby.
Come out here and I will bring you to a party and introduce you as my best girlfriend, Lisa New Car.
And who knows, maybe I'll get work.
Yes, right? Yes, you'll get your own show.
There you go.
You're like, oh my God, we have to move to Los Angeles because I'm on stage 7 nights a week.
See, this is the beauty of being able to do improv, because you don't really get affected by the writer's strike.
Right? And doing a lot of reality spiritual stuff. Thank goodness that's where I'm at right now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Strikes are hard on people, though. I see all my friends on their Instagram striking, and it's so hard.
And Drew Barrymore put up a post that she's stopping everything she's doing because of the strike. And I don't mean to make light of the strike, but honestly, if this was a scripted show, I wouldn't be doing it.
Right. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I have to tell you, I'm not somebody who's I'm pro-union. I'm not obsessed with unions.
Right.
But I can tell you from my friends that have been in the union their whole lives that SAG-AFTRA takes very good care of people. Mm-hmm. Their medical needs, I have friends that have fallen on hard times or become disabled, and they now live in a place that the union helps to pay for. They have a wonderful retirement / end of life home. So there are advantages, you are taken care of, and the pension is amazing. Right. And I have friends that got to a certain age, or for whatever reason they stopped working, and they live quite nicely off their pensions now. And these aren't actors that made millions of dollars. These are working actors that
extras and
people who did guest spots on shows, right. And their faces, but you don't really know who they are, and they never were the lead in a series. So I do think that's wonderful. So I do understand. I also have many friends who were child actors. I'm not getting too political, am I? Who were child actors back in the day when there were no residuals. Right. One of my very best friends was on the Brady Bunch. And, those kids get nothing now. And they did all that work and they sacrificed so much of their childhood. They get zero residuals. Mm-hmm. So I understand sometimes the fight for residuals. And I also understand that sometimes in unions, the unions that have the actors and the celebrities get all the attention and the writers don't get as much attention. So you know what? You got nothing without the writers. So I support anybody's right to want more rights for themselves.
And I got to say, I really love that Eve has found her voice. Maybe it was necessity. Maybe it was just what she felt she was ready to do. But, I was a child actor. I never did anything but live theater because that was my preference. But back then it was tough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They got residuals for 1 year. All those folks from back then, 1 year and then nothing. And those shows are still playing 24/7.
Uh-huh.
So I love the fact that because of the actor strike of 1980, things are different now,
Yeah.
and people are being taken care of. And I think that's wonderful. So, and I don't have a dog in the game in this. Like, I get residuals from nothing.
Right.
So that's not my thing at all. But I think I like to see people being taken care of,
Right.
because I think it's too easy in the world for people in power to not take care of the 3 people are in power and 5 million people aren't being taken care of. And so I like that, especially for artists. Growing up an artist, I like to see people acknowledging artists and the importance of what they bring into people's lives, which is a lot of joy, a lot of escapism. It's the soundtrack of your weddings and your funerals and your graduation and the shows that got you through your childhood, and all of that stuff is so important.
Yes, yes, it is. Now, when somebody calls you for a reading, some people have to go through a certain kind of like little ritual, or are you just like light on?
Light on, light always on. I don't think I ever turn it off. Is that bad? I think when I started doing when I started doing radio every day, so that was 2009, I started doing a daily radio show. I realized that because for me, the same channel that I channel from artistically is the same psychic channel for me.
Right.
I realized I couldn't really close the sunroof because it was too much trouble to open and close. So I just keep it open and just allow messages to come through when they come. So it's pretty easy for me. I'm very thankful for that. But it's also an effort when you leave the light on all the time, because it means you have to filter and screen and protect yourself all the time in your daily life, because you're walking around with this big gaping channel hanging open,
Right. Yes. It all depends on the day for me. If I know I'm going to go into a store or something, it's like, oh no, right off.
Yes,
That's
start at the
okay.
heart.
I don't need to know who's who with
Yes.
who or who isn't with who.
Yes.
But if I'm just basically in small groups, in classes or something, my light is always on. And I make sure that I protect everybody who is in class with me or who is in a group with me. So it's always very important, to know that there are options for people.
Yes.
So.
Yes, I totally agree with you.
So that's how you started in radio. And what has any experiences that you want to talk about that were really, really good or really, really bad? Whichever.
In radio?
Well, I don't want to ask you about the ones that were really, really bad, because that can get messy. But what's really touched you? What's really been one of your...
So when I was 9 years old, my mother took me to see Carol Channing and Hello Dolly. And I think she probably has already seen Hello Dolly 15 times with different people, including Carol Channing. Right. And I remember when my mom was a teenager, she and my grandpa would come down from Poughkeepsie and go to every Sunday and see a show. So she saw Mary Martin in South Pacific, and she saw Eddie Albert in The Music Man with little tiny 3-year-old Ron Howard. Like, she saw everything. Right. So I remember one day she said to me, "You never saw Mary Martin in South Pacific, but you're going to see Carol Channing and Hello Dolly." So we went, and she had a thing backstage where she was meeting people, and she signed my program. She was the first famous person I ever met. In 2009, when I started my daily show, that was the first time I ever interviewed people, because, as I said, on the Stern station, I did a lot of caller stuff. Right. And I invited three within a week. 3 people said to me, "Have you had Allison Arngrim on your show?" Allison played Nellie Olson on Little House on the Prairie. Right. And I said no, and I thought, well, 3 in a week, that's weird. So I reached out to Allison, and she came and did my show. And I knew the minute she sat across from me, we were going to be friends. Like, you just know, right? Right. She's a very good friend now of many years, and I love her dearly. And her publicist called me the next day and said, "I love the interview. Do you want Carol Channing?" And I thought, oh my God. So I came, and she did my show, and she was wonderful. And then she invited me to an event that she was doing, a charity event for her and Allison and her publicist, that was to put a roof on his church that had been destroyed. And I met her backstage. And once again, I met her. And it was like, I mean, I don't want to say she remembered me from when I was 9, because I'm sure she didn't. But there was the magic that I felt when I was 9, I felt again.
Oh.
Like I was 9 years old. And I will always remember that. And I remember I said something to her about her performance. And she said, well, you know about performances because you're an old theater gal, right? And there was just something about it, and it changed me forever. And the joy that it gave my mother, that alone would have been enough. But that was such a magic thing. And having my mom on the show was a magic thing. And as a matter of fact, I had her on my daily show 2 or 3 times. And then one day I said to her, you've never done my Haunted Playground show, which now is on iHeartRadio. And she said, okay, I'll do that. And so she revealed to me on that show that as a child, she had been followed by a hat man. And we had never talked about that in our lives. And she didn't even know what a hat man was. She just started telling these stories. And I thought, oh my God, how? Because we talked about everything. Like, how have we never talked about this? And what a weird thing to learn on the radio. And how interesting that she just started channeling the story. And basically the story is that when she was 5 years old, she grew up in Louisville, very poor, before my grandmother died, and she was orphaned. And this man walked up to her in the park, and with a hat in a trench coat, like Hat Man lore, right?
Right.
And he said, do you want to see something? And she said, okay. And he opened his trench coat, and there were all kinds of little children in the coat. So when she got to, then my grandmother died very suddenly of a ruptured appendix, and the family couldn't support her financially.
Right.
And she couldn't live with her grandfather and her uncle because adult men couldn't have young girls if they weren't married. That's so weird, but that's a whole nother show.
Right.
She went to the orphanage, and she told a social worker in the orphanage that story. And this woman told her at 7 years old, oh, when a man opens his trench coat and you see children, you're actually really seeing his genitals. Now, why somebody told a 7-year-old that? So my mom had always thought he was a flasher. Then one day the lady comes, tells my mom, change your dress, get on the train, you've been adopted. Put her on a train to upstate New York. She didn't even know what was happening. My grandparents are waiting for her on the other end. They take her to this big old 1700s colonial place they lived in outside of Poughkeepsie. And the children's bedrooms were on the 3rd floor. And the first night she's trying to sleep, and she hears this laughing. And she goes to the window, and there's this giant tree in front of her bedroom. It's the house is still there. The wonderful folks from the chapel, the Sacred Mirrors, own it now. That's another weird story. The tree is still there. You can see it in pictures. She goes out, and on the branch of this tree is the guy, dressed just the same. And he's sitting on that branch, swinging his legs and laughing.
Wow.
And every night, the first year she was in that house, he was outside laughing while she was trying to sleep. So she's telling me the story, and she doesn't know what she's talking. She's like, and he had this top hat, and he had a suit. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a hat man. So that was kind of interesting that radio brought a story from my mother that I had never even heard my whole life. Having her on the show was magic, and knowing that I will always have those shows
Yes.
with her was really magic. And you know what? 99%, probably 99.5% of everything that's happened to me on radio has been positive. And the things that have been hard have just been trying, because sometimes you get a guest who doesn't know how to talk, and you have to keep talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. When reality TV first became big was when I was starting that show.
Right.
And I had some folks on from reality shows, and they were brand new to the world. They'd never done radio before, and I didn't know that. They had no idea how to talk. And I had to really make an effort to get a radio show out of it.
Right.
But I wouldn't say there's anything ever happened that was bad per se.
Right. That's good. That's very
All
good.
good.
So we're about
5 minutes left.
Yep.
Thereabouts. Is there anything you want to wrap with that we haven't touched on? We've promoted. How are people going to find information when you get this show up?
My which show? My show? This
The
show?
new network.
My website, sheenametalspiritual.com,
Okay,
has pretty much
that's
everything
now,
about me.
there you go.
yeah.
And I'm on social media everywhere at Sheena Metal.
Mhm.
And I'm always very open and give my phone number out. I can do that if you would like, because I like people to know they can reach out to me in the middle of the night and I'm there.
There you go.
So I'm at 818-437-0886. You can text me 24/7. I always say, if you're sitting around right now feeling like there's not a purpose and nobody cares about you and nobody loves you and there's no reason for you to be here, send me a text message and I will convince you otherwise.
Right.
Well, God bless you, and thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And doing the work you do.
Thank you.
It's God's work. That's all.
Absolutely.
I can say.
I'm just the conduit.
Exactly. And it's refreshing because not everybody understands that.
Yes.
We're
know.
just here to
Be God's representation on earth.
Absolutely. And my
And
wish
then-
for the world is that everyone finds their service and steps
Right.
into it.
Exactly.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay for a minute. Thank you, everyone. Please continue to follow us and, send us emails. Let us know if there's anything you want to hear or from anyone in particular. And as always, blessings. And we love ya. Bye.
Well, I'm going to play my audition.